Imagine this. You've just restored the car your late father left behind. Years of sweat, every bolt turned with memory and pride. You finally open your garage door, sunlight kissing chrome, when suddenly your neighbor screams you've stolen it. Within minutes, sirens are howling. Police swarm your driveway, and a corrupt HOA president waves fake paperwork to prove your property belongs to her. That was the moment my fight began. What unfolded wasn't just about a car. It was about legacy, corruption, and the hidden crimes thriving in quiet suburban streets. It led to federal raids, shattered reputations, and the unmasking of a scheme that had stolen not just property, but people's very histories. And it all started with one scream on an ordinary afternoon. So I have to ask you, what would you have done if your neighbor called 911 claiming you'd stolen your own car? Would you fight back like I did, or let the system crush you? If this story pulled you in, if you believe truth still has the power to tear down lies, then join me. Hit that subscribe button because this is only the beginning. More stories are waiting. Stories where justice doesn't come easy, but always comes eventually. The air still carried the smell of gasoline and hot oil when I pulled into the driveway. My hands bore the day's work, fingers blackened with grease that had seeped deep into the cracks of my skin, no matter how many times I scrubbed. It was the kind of smell that never left, the scent of creation, of metal resurrected from decay. With a click of the remote, the garage door rumbled open, its slow ascent revealing the silhouette that had consumed nearly 2 years of my life. The 1968 Shelby GT 500 sat there like a monument, its chrome trim catching the dying light of the sun, its paint so deep and lustrous it seemed to drink the light instead of reflect it. I stood there for a moment, breath held, as though I needed to remind myself this wasn't a dream. That machine wasn't just steel and rubber, it was the last bond between me and my father, a man who died too soon, leaving behind a project he never finished. Every bolt I turned on this car was a conversation with him. Every part I restored was a chance to continue the dialogue we were robbed of. And then it happened. A piercing scream shattered the evening calm. "That man just stole my car. Call 911 now." I froze, turning to see Beverly Lang, my neighbor, self-proclaimed enforcer of everything the homeowners association touched, charging across her manicured lawn like a banshee. Her blonde bob, too perfect to ever move out of place, swung slightly as she pressed her phone to her ear, barking into it with the zeal of someone who believed her voice alone carried the weight of law. I stood there dumbfounded, the Shelby gleaming behind me, the keys warm in my palm. But Beverly wasn't stopping. "Officers, yes, I see him right now. He's trying to hide the vehicle. He stole it. I have proof." Her shrill cries carried over the sound of a siren that had begun wailing in the distance, growing closer by the second. My heart sank. I knew Beverly's type well. At 45, she had made herself the queen of the HOA. To her, rules weren't suggestions, they were weapons. And she wielded them with more precision than most soldiers wield rifles. She measured grass with a ruler. She fined families for leaving trash cans out a half hour too long. And me? I was her personal obsession, the man who dared to turn his garage into a restoration shop in her pristine suburban kingdom. The flashing blue and red lights announced the arrival of the police before I could collect my thoughts. 2 officers stepped out, hands resting lightly on their holsters, and Beverly nearly threw herself at them. She was waving a piece of paper, her voice climbing into a register that could have cracked glass. "Thank God you're here. This man has stolen my car. I have the bill of sale right here from a client in Nevada. That's a Shelby GT 500, and he's trying to claim it as his own." I stood frozen for a beat, watching her eyes lock onto my car with something deeper than righteous indignation. It was hunger, desire, as though she were staring not at a car, but at something sacred she was entitled to. One of the officers, Rodriguez, according to his badge, approached me slowly, his expression weary, as though he knew already this was going to be less grand theft auto and more suburban melodrama. Still, procedure was procedure. "Sir," he said, "we're going to need to see your documentation for this vehicle. Registration, insurance, title, whatever you've got." Behind him, Beverly continued to rattle off the Shelby's specifications. Engine size, trim details, even the factory production run. Her knowledge was disturbingly precise, as though she'd spent hours studying it. I pulled my documents from the fireproof box I kept them in, handing over the title in my name, the registration, the insurance card. Rodriguez examined them carefully. Then he turned as Beverly shoved her own paperwork into his hands, a bill of sale claiming she had sold the exact same Shelby to a buyer in Las Vegas just a week earlier for $75,000. Rodriguez frowned, flipping between the papers. This is unusual. Your documents show continuous ownership, but hers... He trailed off, clearly uneasy with what looked like a conflict no patrol officer expected to resolve on a quiet suburban street. Can you prove you've had this car in your possession for an extended period of time? I felt the corner of my mouth twitch into a smile. Beverly thought she could play this game with me. She had no idea. Officer, I said, stepping toward the car, I've got 2 years' worth of progress photos, hundreds of hours of restoration videos, and a complete build log. But that's not all. My father, he was paranoid about theft. He made sure this car carried something no paperwork could ever fake. I gestured toward the hood. If you'll allow me, I can show you right now. Rodriguez exchanged a glance with his partner, then nodded. All right, sir, show me. As I reached for the latch, Beverly's face contorted, her confidence faltering for the first time. She knew something was about to be revealed, something that might unravel the lie she had so carefully constructed. Dot. The hood creaked open, and with it, the secrets of the Eleanor began to breathe again. Dot. The Shelby's hood lifted, releasing a faint metallic groan, as if the car itself was aware it had become the centerpiece of a trial. The polished engine block gleamed under the fading sunlight. Every wire and component arranged with precision only a restorer obsessed with detail could achieve. But this wasn't just about aesthetics. My father had left me more than blueprints. He had left me safeguards. You'll notice something interesting, I told Officer Rodriguez, pointing to a small, inconspicuous plate bolted to the firewall behind the engine. The metal was weathered, etched with a series of numbers that didn't appear on Beverly's so-called bill of sale. Rodriguez leaned close, squinting. What am I looking at? That, I said, is my father's paranoia made permanent. A hidden VIN engraving, custom marked by him nearly 30 years ago. The official VIN is here. I tapped the obvious factory plate riveted under the windshield. But Dad etched his own code where no thief would think to look. He filed it with a notary back in the 90s. I've got the certified document inside the house. For the first time since the officers arrived, Beverly's voice cracked. That's ridiculous. That doesn't mean anything. Anyone could have scratched some numbers into the... Rodriguez cut her off with a raised hand. Ma'am, let's let him finish. I stepped aside, pulling out my phone. Within seconds, I had scrolled through years of progress photos. The officers leaned in, watching the Shelby transform from rust-corroded shell to the gleaming machine before them. Each timestamp was embedded in the corner, each shot featuring my face, my hands, sometimes even my sister Emily dropping by to help. 2 years of work, I said, all documented. And here's the kicker. I swiped to a video dated 18 months back. In the clip, I'm under the hood with a flashlight, pointing to the very same hidden engraving. My voice on the recording is muffled but clear enough. Dad put this here so no one could ever claim this car wasn't his, and one day, mine. Rodriguez's partner gave a low whistle. That's pretty definitive. Beverly's veneer of confidence shattered. She grabbed at the papers in Rodriguez's hand. No, you don't understand. He's a fraud. He probably made those videos after he stole it. Ma'am, Rodriguez said evenly, the timestamps show otherwise. This car has been in his possession for at least 2 years, maybe longer. Your paperwork doesn't add up. Her face reddened, eyes narrowing like a cornered predator. You don't know who you're dealing with, she hissed, lowering her voice, but not enough to hide the venom. I sell cars for a living. I have clients in places you can't imagine. This car doesn't belong to him. It was never supposed to. Something in the way she said it, the near-religious conviction, sent a chill through me. This wasn't about a mistaken identity or clerical error. This was about desire that had metastasized into obsession. Rodriguez closed his notepad. Here's what's going to happen. Mr. Miller, we're going to file your evidence along with your documentation. Ma'am, if your bill of sale is legitimate, it'll be verified through the Nevada records. But until then, I strongly advise you to stop making claims you can't back up. The officers turned to leave, but Beverly wasn't finished. She lunged forward, her voice now shrieking across the cul-de-sac. This isn't over, Ethan. You think a few photos and scratches prove anything? You'll regret this. Her words hung in the air long after the cruisers rolled away. The neighbors who had peeked from behind curtains quickly disappeared, blinds snapping shut. The street fell eerily quiet except for the steady thrum of the Shelby's idling engine. I lowered the hood slowly, hands trembling, not from fear, but from a gnawing awareness that Beverly wasn't bluffing. She had resources, connections, maybe even allies in higher places. This wasn't just about a car. It was about power, and power, in Beverly Lang's world, was never surrendered without a war. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me rise, checking the garage, double-locking doors, scanning shadows for movement. The Shelby gleamed under fluorescent lights, beautiful and vulnerable, all at once. Dad's legacy was in that car, and Beverly had made it clear she would come for it again. And the worst part? Deep down, I knew she wasn't working alone. The next morning began with the familiar rumble of delivery trucks and lawnmowers echoing through the neighborhood, but the air felt different, heavier. I sipped my coffee on the porch, scanning Beverly's house across the street. The curtains drawn, no movement, but I knew better than to think silence meant surrender. Emily stopped by before heading to work. She was younger than me by 3 years, but had inherited Dad's sharp eye for patterns. When I told her what happened, she leaned against the porch railing, arms crossed. She called the cops on you, waving fake documents, and somehow thought that would work, she said. Ethan, this isn't about HOA rules anymore. This is about something bigger. People don't go that far unless they've already invested too much to back down. I nodded. She mentioned a client in Nevada. She didn't say it directly, but it was like she was following orders, not just scheming on her own. Emily frowned. Then she's a broker. The car wasn't for her. She was trying to move it for someone else. Her words settled like ice in my stomach. The Shelby wasn't just a prize. It was a product. And if Beverly had promised it to someone powerful, then I had just stepped in front of a moving train. That evening, Marcus Rodriguez, my neighbor 2 doors down, came by. A retired private investigator with salt and pepper hair and a permanent look of suspicion etched into his face. Marcus had been watching the whole scene yesterday from his driveway. I don't usually get involved in neighborhood drama, he said, pulling up a chair in my garage. But Beverly isn't just any drama. That woman's been cozy with city council members for years. I've seen her at fundraisers with people who shouldn't even know her name. She's a middlewoman, a connector, and connectors only exist because someone bigger is pulling the strings. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. If she wants your Shelby that bad, it's not for her collection, it's inventory. The way he said it made my skin crawl. Inventory. Like my father's car, his blood and sweat was just another line item in some underground catalog. Look, Marcus continued, I've dealt with these rings before. They don't mess around. Classic cars, antiques, even heirlooms. They strip communities bare and ship the pieces overseas. By the time the owners figure it out, it's too late. If Beverly's involved, your dad's Shelby is already on someone's shopping list. I thought about the way Beverly rattled off specs about Eleanor. The horsepower, the engine modifications, the serial codes. She hadn't memorized those for fun. She was prepping for a sale. That night, just past midnight, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Against better judgment, I answered. Ethan Miller, the voice said, smooth, calm, like it had practiced intimidation for decades. You're in possession of something that doesn't belong to you, something that was promised. I swallowed hard, gripping the phone tighter. Who is this? Consider me the rightful owner, the voice replied. You've got a week to deliver the Shelby. If you don't, well, accidents happen. Garages catch fire. Families suffer. Before I could respond, the line went dead. The room spun. My throat was dry. This wasn't Beverly anymore. This was something far beyond HOA disputes. My father's Shelby had drawn out sharks, the kind that circled patiently before taking their bite. And for the first time, I realized that Dad's paranoia hadn't been misplaced. The car wasn't just a connection to him. It was bait, and I had just taken the hook. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps, every flicker of headlights outside like the beginning of a raid. By sunrise, I was running on caffeine and nerves, pacing the garage floor like a soldier guarding a bunker. Emily came by with a cardboard box in her arms. She dropped it on the workbench. Dad's old files, yellowing with age, scavenged from the attic. "Something's off about that phone call," she said. "He sounded too sure, like he knew exactly who you were, where you lived, and what buttons to push." I figured Dad's files might explain why. We sorted through technical manuals, receipts, and company newsletters from his aerospace days. Most of it was routine, until Emily pulled out a 1995 newsletter with a group photo from the annual company picnic. Her face drained of color. "Ethan," she whispered, pointing at the caption. "There, comma, standing right next to Dad with a stiff smile, was a younger version of the voice I'd heard last night. The caption read, Harold Green, Quality Assurance Manager, celebrating promotion to senior oversight. I felt my pulse hammer in my temples. Harold Green, the man now threatening me, had worked with Dad 3 decades ago. Coincidence? Emily asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. I shook my head. No. Dad filed safety complaints about faulty aircraft parts in '95. All of them had Harold's signature on the approvals. Marcus showed up that evening carrying a duffel bag full of surveillance gear. His eyes scanned the garage, then the street. "Time to stop waiting for them to make the next move," he said. "We watch Beverly. People like her don't freelance. She's running errands for Harold." So, at 6 a.m. the next morning, we sat in Marcus's beat-up Ford across from Beverly's immaculate white BMW. He walked me through the basics of tailing someone without being noticed. Patience, distance, never staring directly. At 7:30 sharp, Beverly left her house and headed toward the warehouse district. My stomach sank as we rolled past the gates of Westside Storage Solutions. Through the chain-link fence, I saw them. Rows of cars under tarps, gleaming chrome poking through like buried treasure. A 1967 Mustang that looked just like Mrs. Patterson's. A Harley-Davidson nearly identical to Marcus's stolen bike. And there, in Thes E-corner, under a gray tarp but unmistakable in shape and presence, was Eleanor. Dad's Shelby. "This isn't about your car anymore," Marcus muttered, snapping photos with a telephoto lens. "This is a machine, a system. They're strip mining entire neighborhoods." Emily's research confirmed it. Green Associates, Harold's company, specialized in estate liquidations. On paper, it looked legitimate, but Emily had connected the dots. Every family pressured by Beverly's HOA violations ended up selling valuables through Harold's firm. 15 households in 2 years. Cars, motorcycles, antiques, gone. It wasn't sloppy or desperate. It was surgical. A conspiracy dressed up as neighborhood regulation. And the worst part? Beverly wasn't the mastermind. She was just a cog. Harold Green had been planning this for decades. The first real strike came on a Tuesday afternoon. I had just pulled into the driveway when a black SUV eased to a stop across the street. The tinted window rolled down, and a man in a tailored suit leaned out just far enough for me to see the outline of his jaw. "Ethan Miller?" His voice was flat, businesslike. "Mr. Green would like a word." Before I could answer, he tossed a small envelope onto the pavement. The SUV pulled away without another word, disappearing down the block, as if it had never been there. I picked up the envelope, hands trembling. Inside was a single photo, Eleanor, my Shelby, sitting inside the storage warehouse we had scouted days earlier. Across the bottom, in neat block letters, were 3 words, "Know your place." Emily came over as soon as I called her. She stared at the photo, then exhaled slowly. "He's baiting you, testing how far he can push before you snap." Marcus didn't mince words. "He's also showing his cards. He knows we've seen the warehouse and he doesn't care. That means he thinks he owns the system protecting it." That night, I found myself staring at Dad's notes again. The sketches of Eleanor, the carefully written restoration steps, and something else I had overlooked. A folder labeled "For Ethan, if I'm gone." Inside was a stack of typed letters, carbon copies addressed to company officials, federal inspectors, even members of Congress. Each letter documented safety defects, fraudulent part approvals, and again, the name Harold Green. Dad hadn't just been restoring a car. He had been documenting a trail, one Harold clearly wanted buried. Eleanor wasn't only a vehicle, she was leverage, proof. A key Harold couldn't let resurface. 2 days later, the pressure escalated. Beverly filed another formal complaint with the HOA, this time claiming that Eleanor was abandoned property because she hadn't been seen in operation for years. She cited a bylaw no one had ever heard of, conveniently amended just weeks earlier. The HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting. When I arrived at the community hall, Harold was there. Older now, hair thinner, but unmistakable from Dad's photo. He sat at the head of the table like he owned it, tapping a pen against the wood with calm authority. "Mr. Miller," he said, his smile thin as paper, "we have rules in this neighborhood. Your father didn't respect them. I hope you'll be smarter." The room was silent. Even Beverly looked uneasy, glancing between Harold and me as if unsure how far he would go. I leaned forward. "You're not taking Eleanor." His eyes flickered, sharp and cold. "You still don't understand, do you? It was never about the car. It's about reminding people what happens when they defy structure. Your father didn't listen. Look where it got him." Emily's hand squeezed my shoulder, grounding me. Marcus's gaze stayed locked on Harold, memorizing every word. For the first time, I realized something chilling. Harold wasn't just running a scam. He was running a philosophy, a doctrine of control, using bureaucracy as weapon. And unless we found a way to dismantle it, Eleanor and everything Dad fought for would vanish into his machine forever. The next week felt like living inside a chess match, where every move I made was already predicted. Strange cars lingered on the street outside my house, never the same twice. My mail started arriving opened, resealed with cheap tape. The city inspector knocked on my door with a sudden, random check, citing complaints of toxic fumes from my garage. Even the bank called, questioning unusual activity on my mortgage, activity I hadn't authorized. It was all pressure, all designed to make me slip, to push me into a corner where Harold could swoop in and call it due process. Marcus showed up one evening with a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. He spread out a series of aerial photos across my kitchen table. "Drone footage," he explained. "Harold's people have been running surveillance on you. Notice the timing? They're tracking every time you take Eleanor out, every visitor who comes by. He's building a file." Emily shook her head in disgust. "This isn't an HOA issue anymore. This is organized harassment." But Marcus only leaned closer, voice low. "Which means he's scared. You don't push this hard unless you're worried something could break your grip." I knew what he meant. Dad's letters, the documentation, the unspoken history buried under decades of silence. The evidence I had uncovered wasn't just my inheritance. It was a threat to Harold's entire empire. That night, I sat in the garage with Eleanor, the soft gleam of her paint reflecting the single overhead bulb. For the first time, I noticed how the restoration had become more than therapy. Every bolt I tightened, every seam I welded had been a defiance of Harold's shadow. Dad had built her as armor, and finishing her had forged me into something Harold didn't expect, a man willing to fight. The breaking point came at 2:14 a.m. A loud crack split the quiet, followed by the shattering of glass. I bolted up round, to see a brick lying on my living room floor, shards glittering around it. Attached was a note scrawled in thick black marker: "Drive it out, or lose it." By the time I reached the street, a black sedan was already disappearing into the night. My hands shook with rage, but beneath the anger was something sharper: resolve. The next morning, Marcus met me with a simple plan. "We flipped the board. You've been reacting to Harold's moves. Time to make him react to yours." Emily nodded, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were case files from 3 other communities, different states, different faces, but the same pattern. HOAs weaponized, possessions seized, property funneled through shell brokers, each thread tied back to Harold. "This isn't local," Emily said. "This is national. Harold's running a machine that eats people's lives." And now, for the first time, we had the pieces to expose it. But the question lingered in the air, heavy and unspoken. How do you fight a man who already thinks he owns the system you'd need to bring him down? The offensive began not with noise but with silence. Marcus insisted that if we moved too quickly, Harold would sniff it out and crush us before we had the chance to breathe. "Predators like him don't fear the law," Marcus explained as he pinned maps and timelines to my garage wall. They fear exposure. So we don't take him to court first. We take him to the light. Emily leaned over the table, her lawyer's mind already racing. But exposure without structure is just rumor. We need hard evidence, documents, numbers, witnesses who will stand up. That's when Marcus pulled a small black flash drive from his jacket pocket. Got this from a contact at the county recorder's office. Harold's shell companies, transfers, property deeds, even offshore accounts tied to HOA seizures. He's been sloppy, got greedy. That's where we hit him. The plan was brutal in its simplicity. Compile every shred of evidence, leak just enough to get attention, and let Harold's paranoia unravel him. But Harold wasn't going to sit still. 2 nights later, Emily's office was broken into. Nothing taken, at least nothing obvious. Just drawers rifled through, files scattered, a single sticky note left behind on her desk. "You're your father's daughter." She didn't show me at first. I found her sitting in the garage, staring at Eleanor like she was searching for strength in the steel. When she finally handed me the note, her hands were trembling. "Ethan, he knows." For the first time, I saw my sister afraid not just for her reputation or career, but for her life. It was the same fear Dad must have carried when Harold cornered him 3 decades ago. But fear wasn't going to save us now. Marcus doubled security around my house, installing cameras, sensors, motion detectors. "They'll try to scare you," he said, adjusting the lens of a camera by the front door. "They'll try to corner you. But remember, every scare tactic leaves fingerprints." And then, like a crack of thunder, Harold made his mistake. A routine HOA meeting, live-streamed for transparency, accidentally included 15 seconds of Harold's private call before the feed was cut. 15 seconds where he spoke to an unknown partner, words dripping with arrogance. "Move the shipment tonight. Miller's kids are circling too close." The clip spread like wildfire, pulled from the archived recording before Harold's team could delete it. Neighbors whispered, journalists called. For the first time, Harold Green's untouchable mask began to slip. Emily seized the moment, filing an injunction against the HOA board to freeze all asset transfers pending an investigation. The judge granted a temporary hold. The next morning, a package arrived at my doorstep with no return address. Inside was a single photograph. Eleanor, parked safely in my garage, circled in red marker. The message was clear. Harold wasn't finished. He was just beginning to fight. Back. Retaliation came fast. Like a storm front, no one could outrun. 2 days after the photograph appeared on my doorstep, my bank account froze. Not drained, just inaccessible. "Pending investigation," the teller explained with rehearsed detachment when I demanded answers. Someone had filed a fraud report under my name, linking my business transactions to Harold's shell companies. It was a perfect counterfeit paper trail, enough to stall me financially and make me look guilty. Emily was livid. "Classic projection. He commits the fraud, then paints you as the criminal. If this sticks, Ethan, you're not just broke, you're ruined." Marcus wasn't surprised. "It's how he survived 30 years. He doesn't just steal, he flips the story, makes the victim look like the perpetrator. And the worst part? Most people believe it." But Harold overplayed his hand. In his arrogance, he had filed the report using one of the same dummy corporations Marcus had uncovered on that flash drive. Paperwork doesn't lie forever, and Emily was already drafting motions to expose the inconsistency. That night, I heard the rumble. Not of Eleanor's engine, but of heavy tires grinding gravel outside my house. I peeked through the blinds to see 2 black SUVs idling across the street. Their windows were tinted, but I felt the eyes on me, cold, watching, waiting. Marcus came over within the hour, his badge still hanging from his belt. He looked at the SUVs, then at me. "They're not here to shoot. They're here to watch. Psychological warfare." Emily's voice shook when she whispered, "Just like Dad." That cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Dad had spent the last months of his life under the same kind of pressure. Watched, cornered, branded a liar by the very man now circling us. And if we weren't careful, history was about to repeat itself. But history can be rewritten. We decided to flip the script. If Harold wanted us under surveillance, we'd let him watch and give him a show he couldn't ignore. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Saturday night. Beverly, still clawing at her public image, insisted on broadcasting live to assure the community of stability. That gave us the perfect stage. Emily prepared a dossier of Harold's shell companies, cross-referenced with Marcus's recovered data. I prepped Eleanor for one more reveal, not of horsepower, but of evidence. Hidden beneath her polished hood, Dad's original restoration logs contained more than just sketches. They contained handwritten notes, dates, names, and cryptic references to Harold's dealings back in the late 80s. Proof Dad had been documenting Harold long before anyone else dared. The plan was dangerous, but simple. Use Beverly's obsession with live streaming as the very channel to burn Harold alive in front of his own empire. Saturday night came. The room buzzed with the false calm of neighbors pretending everything was normal while the cameras rolled. Harold sat at the head of the table, a smug emperor presiding over peasants. Then Emily stood, dossier in hand. "Mr. Green," she began, her voice steady but sharp enough to cut glass. "Before this board votes on another transfer of assets, I think the community deserves to see where those assets really go." Marcus hit the projector. The screen filled with transaction logs, corporate seals, offshore account numbers. Beverly gasped so loud it echoed through the mic feed. For the first time in my life, I saw Harold Green hesitate. Just a flicker, but a crack in the armor all the same. And that's when I knew. The fight wasn't about Eleanor anymore. It was about whether Harold's empire of theft would collapse under the weight of truth, or whether he'd bury us all before it fell. The silence that followed Emily's words was the kind you could hear breathing. Every neighbor in that fluorescent-lit room shifted in their seat, torn between curiosity and fear. The projector's glow painted Harold's face in pale light, highlighting the twitch at the corner of his jaw. He leaned back slowly, fingers steepled, the portrait of false composure. "Impressive theatrics," he said finally, his voice calm, almost indulgent. "But anyone with a printer and a vivid imagination can create fake ledgers. The real question is, why are you so obsessed with destroying me, Ethan? What exactly are you hiding?" And just like that, the trap was sprung. Harold turned his gaze to the camera broadcasting live on Beverly's HOA Facebook page. "Neighbors, you should ask yourselves why this man, who claims to be one of you, keeps producing fabricated documents. Perhaps because he knows what really happened to his father. Perhaps because he's desperate to cover his family's shame." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Beverly, ever the opportunist, added gasoline. "He's been running a business out of his garage against HOA policy. How do we know those restoration logs aren't just part of some scam? I mean, really, who keeps 20 years of receipts unless they're hiding something?" I stood, fists clenched. "Because unlike you, I've got nothing to hide. My father spent his life trying to expose Harold, and it cost him everything. Tonight, you're all going to see why." I crossed to Eleanor, parked just outside the meeting hall with her hood popped open. The brass plaque gleamed under the lights, but it was the binder I pulled from beneath the hood that stole the air from the room. "These are Dad's logs, not copies. Originals, written in grease-stained ink long before anyone here thought of live streaming their grievances to Facebook." I opened to a page dated 1989. The handwriting was shaky, but clear. "Met with HG again. Refuses to halt shipment of faulty components. Says he'll ruin me if I report. Can't stay silent. Too many lives at stake. Gasp." This whispers. Someone's phone buzzed with the live stream chat exploding, comments flying faster than Beverly's moderators could delete. Harold's mask slipped. His voice hardened. "Those notes prove nothing. Your father was a bitter, failed mechanic who couldn't accept responsibility for his own mistakes. That's the truth." Emily stepped in, her eyes locked on him like a hawk. "No, Harold. The truth is on this cassette tape." She held up a small recorder, the very one from Dad's safety deposit box. With a click, the room filled with Harold's 30-year-old voice. "If you think you can destroy my career with your self-righteous whistleblowing, you're making a very dangerous mistake. Accidents happen to people who don't know when to keep their mouths shut." The crowd erupted. Half the neighbors stood, demanding answers. The other half sat frozen, realizing they'd been living under a predator's thumb for years. Harold rose, slamming a palm against the table. Enough of this circus. None of you understand what's really at stake. But for the first time, the Emperor's voice cracked. The live stream audience smelled blood. Comments blazed across the feed. He just admitted it. Call the FBI. HOA, more like Organized Crime Association. And in that moment, I knew Harold had lost control, not just of the room, but of the story he'd spent decades writing. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Neighbors shouted over one another, phones recording from every angle, the HOA Facebook live stream ballooning past 2,000 viewers. Harold's face, once smug, now glistened with sweat. He lunged. One hand shot for the recorder in Emily's grasp, the other reaching for my father's binder. Instinct took over. I stepped between them, bracing against his momentum. The impact knocked us both backward into Eleanor's fender. For a heartbeat, the sound of her polished chrome groaning under Harold's weight felt like the world-ending. But Eleanor held, and so did I. Federal agents, who had been waiting outside under Agent Taylor's orders, stormed through the hall doors. "Step back, Harold," she barked, sidearm drawn. He froze, chest heaving, eyes darting from the recorder to the binder to the dozens of phones pointed at him. The illusion of control shattered. "This isn't over," he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "You think the truth will save you? The system protects people like me." Taylor pressed forward, cuffs flashing in the fluorescent light. "Not anymore." She snapped them around his wrists as the room erupted in applause. Even Beverly sat stunned, her face ghost pale as if she'd just realized the monster she'd been feeding. Emily slid the recorder back into her purse with trembling hands. "Dad's voice is out there now," she whispered. "He finally gets to speak." I looked at Eleanor, her brass plaque glinting under the hall lights. "In memory of David Miller, a man who chose truth over safety." My chest tightened. Dad had lost his life fighting Harold, but tonight, 30 years later, he had won. Neighbors gathered close, their voices rising in a chorus of relief, outrage, and determination. Mrs. Patterson clutched my hand, tears streaking her cheeks. "Your father saved more than lives, Ethan. He saved us all." Harold was led past the cameras, jeers chasing him into the night. For once, he had no clever words, no cold smile, only the look of a man who finally understood he wasn't untouchable. As the live stream hit its peak, Beverly attempted one last interruption, shouting, "This isn't fair. I was only following orders." But nobody listened. Her voice drowned beneath the tide of neighbors reclaiming their dignity, their history, their freedom. Eleanor's engine turned over with a deep, steady rumble as I drove her back to Dad's garage that night. The sound wasn't just horsepower. It was legacy, proof that justice, though slow, always arrives. And as the garage door closed, I understood what Dad had been trying to teach me all along. Power built on lies crumbles, but truth endures, even if it takes a lifetime. The fight was over, the story complete,